The Florida Gators are one of only 2 teams this century to win back-to-back national titles, and they're quietly positioning themselves to try and do it again. After being an elite team last year and winning one of the best championships we've seen in a while, the Gators got off to a slower start this season, losing 4 of their first 9 games. Since then though, they've rattled off 15 wins in their last 17 games. They're number 12 in the AP poll but sit at number 5 in KenPom and number 4 in Torvik at the time of recording. So how has Todd Golden once again built a championship caliber roster despite them being potentially a bit underrated right now? We'll go through 7 key areas of what makes them talented and also a bonus 8th topic of what the Florida X Factor is come March, starting first with the roster construction. Florida is the 13th tallest team in D1 this season, and they play one of the biggest front courts in the country. Their starting lineup consists of 6'9" Thomas Houck, 6'11" Alex Condon, and 6'10" Ruben Shinyulu. They'll also bring 7'1" Micah Handlockton off the bench. Florida doesn't have overly big guards, although backcourt duo Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee aren't small by any means, sitting at 6'3" and 6'4" respectively. Florida's 5 most used lineups this season all have 6'9" Thomas Houck playing the 3, a testament that the Gators have been doubling down on playing big. This sets up their entire identity, both offensively and defensively. Take a look at this chart here. On the x-axis is offensive rebounding percentage, and on the y-axis is paint points per game. Florida sits in the top right area, in large part because of the lineups they choose to throw out there. There's pros and cons to the big lineups they play, I think highlighted by this chart here though. The x-axis is 2-point percentage and the y-axis is 3-point percentage. Florida is among the top teams in the country in 2-point percentage, while being among the worst in 3-point percentage. In the era where the public perception is that spacing and 3-point shooting is king, Florida, along with some other teams in college this season, have zagged in this area, choosing to dominate the paint and the glass instead. It was a bit of a slower start to the season as Florida had some things to figure out, but that's why there's 31 regular season games. Now that we're nearing the end of the season, Florida is starting to really click together. Florida is currently one of 5 teams this season to have 6 different players who are averaging 10 plus points per game. Florida is generally an 8-man rotation, but all 8 can contribute. In addition to the points per game, Florida is the only team in the country who currently has 4 different players averaging at least 6 rebounds a game. They're one of only 13 teams this century to do so. Florida has tripled down on playing big, understanding where their strength lies. That leads to a lot of points in the paint, the next area we'll talk about. Florida currently averages 43.5 points in the paint per game, the 4th most in all of college basketball. Over 50% of all of their points come from inside of the paint, the 11th most in the country. It's safe to say that generating looks on the interior is the top priority for Florida on the offensive side of the ball. Here's a look at their shot chart on the season, with field goal percentage on the left and percentage of field goal attempts on the right. This shows that even more than just simply getting the ball into the paint, Florida wants to get all the way to the rim. They're currently 30th in the country in field goal percentage at the rim and 18th in field goal attempt rate at the rim. Given the Gators' desire to dominate the interior while not having great shooting, it seemed like defenses should simply pack the paint and make life tough. However, that's easier said than done. There are a lot of different areas that Florida uses on offense to generate looks in the paint, but I want to specifically focus on 3 in this section. We'll start with Florida's ability to get out and run in transition. They currently have the 55th fastest offense in the country per KenPom, and they're also in the top 20% of transition efficiency. They currently average 16.5 fast break points per game, the 9th most in the country. As would be expected, the large majority of these points are coming in the paint, and there's a few ways that they go about it. This is right after a make that Missouri had against Florida. Florida's going to grab the ball and push the ball up. You're going to see Condon run directly to the rim, where he's able to get the lob and convert. This is another example of after a make, Florida's just going to push the ball up the floor, and instead of Houck settling for a 3, he's going to drive into the paint where he collapses the defense and gets the drop off to Condon. And sometimes it is as simple as Boogie Flan just being able to get a steal, get out and run, and convert at the rim. This one isn't as much of a fast break, but Florida still pushes the ball ahead, and I want to call out Condon posting early so that way he can catch and do his work early. Which that does bring us to our next point, which is post-ups. It's one way for Florida to be able to punish smaller teams on the interior. Just Condon and Shinyulu are the ones getting post looks. Condon has a bit more wiggle to his game, being able to face up or take multiple dribbles before getting to a hook. Shinyulu can also definitely do some of this, but he's at his best when he pin guys in the post. Despite a lack of consistent shooting, Florida does a good job of creating enough space for these guys to be able to work in the post. One way Florida does this is by using their roller to then seal in the post. Here, Houck is going to hand off, and you're going to see he's already in position to catch the ball in the post. Now once he gets it, he's able to quickly go up, get into his move, and convert at the rim. Another way that Florida will seal is coming off of pin down screens. Here, Florida gets to a floppy look where Shinyulu is going to set a pin down and immediately turn and seal in the post. From there, once he catches, he's able to face up, rip, and have a very nice move to convert. I want to highlight that Florida here, they have movement and then still spacing as they get the ball in the post. It starts with an Iverson cut, where then Shinyulu is going to come off a wedge screen and post. As this is happening, you're going to see Condon dive to the weak side block, occupying his defender, and Florida also has Houck located one pass away, so that way their best shooter makes it more difficult for Tennessee to help. From there, Shinyulu has the space to be able to go to work. Now, when teams do show help in the post like South Carolina does here, that's where you can get these cuts from other bigs getting to the rim in a big-to-big pass. Which that brings us to Florida's ability to cut. It's often just within the natural flow of their offense, but Florida has realized that cutting into any space oftentimes can create any space needed, because it forces defenses to have to react rather than just being stationary. Oftentimes, the cuts come from Florida being able to get in the paint and collapse defense. Here, Lee is going to get the switch and then be able to attack, forcing Kentucky to rotate, which then opens up the little lob pass for Shinyulu. As Florida pushes the ball here, they're going to set up an empty corner pick and roll, where Lee is going to be able to hit Condon on this short roll, and from there, Condon rotates the defense before getting the drop off to Handleton. And in this clip right here, you're going to see Condon move the ball back and forth before flowing into a middle pick and roll. Now, Condon's going to roll, and Houck is going to replace the roll at the top. So now as Lee gets downhill, he's able to hit Condon on the cut, who is then able to go up and convert through contact. That takes us to our third area to talk about, Florida's pick and roll game. Now, Florida isn't a team that runs a ton of just pure pick and rolls, but when you include handoffs into the equation, that number definitely starts to rise. Behind the dynamic guards of Fland and Lee, Florida has a 1-2 perimeter punch who are both capable as downhill drivers and facilitators. This is the one area where Florida will generate some three-point looks, but a good percentage of them come off the dribble, leading to lower efficiencies. What they lack in shooting capabilities, though, Florida makes up for with their ability to space and allow their guards to drive. In the pure pick and roll game, there are two major spacing options that Florida goes with, 1-3 across and an empty corner pick and roll. For handoffs, they love to be able to get into zoom action on one side of the floor, which then opens up a lot of options for them. Let's go through a series of plays now to show all of this. This first clip is just to kind of show the base Florida offense, where you're going to see the ball moving around back and forth on the perimeter, looking for different pick and rolls, handoffs, post-ups, driving opportunities. Eventually, they end up with a Lee pick and roll in the corner where he's able to drive and convert at the rim. This is going to be an example of their 1-3 across spacing. Notice that as this pick and roll is happening, along the baseline there are 3 Florida players. So now as this pick and roll happens, you're going to see Flan have the space to be able to get downhill, and also Handleton is going to seal his big defender in the post so that way Flan can get all the way to the rim and convert. This is another example and a reason why Florida is able to play multiple bigs. Again, 1-3 across, and Flan is going to actually refuse this screen to get downhill. Now, instead of just standing in the way, you're going to see again, Handleton is going to seal his big defender, so that way the rim protector isn't able to contest the shot nearly as much. This is an example of the empty corner pick and roll. Notice that as the ball gets moved around for Florida, instead of filling to this corner, you're going to see Brown fill to the other corner, now setting up this empty corner pick and roll, where they're able to hit the short roller, who's able to get into the paint and convert at the rim. Movement again creates the empty corner, where Houck is going to cut through along the baseline, now opening up this empty corner pick and roll. With TCU putting 2 on the ball, Condon's able to get on the short roll, where he's able to kind of get into a post-up and convert over the top of the defense. Houck is one of the main shooters on this Florida roster, and the Gators utilize him very well. Here it's going to be a middle pick and roll where, as this screen happens, notice how Houck is going to be replacing the roll, putting pressure on the defense since he's able to knock down these threes. Now we'll get into one of Florida's favorite sets, which is a horn zoom look. Here they start in a horns formation, getting the ball into the elbow. Now as Flan cuts through, Florida's kind of just moving the ball around, but it eventually sets up this empty corner handoff where Flan's able to turn against the defense, get downhill, and convert at the rim. This is going to be the same exact play where Florida starts in this horn set, which is 2 at the elbows and 2 in the corners. And then they're going to come off a screen, get the ball up top, and this one flowed directly into zoom action, which is a pin down into a handoff. Clavzar is able to then turn the corner, utilizing the seal from Shinyulu down low to convert at the rim. This one shows a variation where they still get the ball into the elbow, act like they're going into a handoff, but instead then Condon keeps, which sets up a stagger pin down for Lee to be able to catch, curl, and convert at the rim. The next topic is arguably the single most important one for Florida, their offensive rebounding. With Florida being a bottom 20 3-point shooting team in the country, you'd think that they should take less of those shots. However, those 3-point looks, along with a lot of their look at the rim, allows Florida to utilize their size to dominate the offensive glass. Florida currently has 5 different players in the rotation who have an offensive rebounding percentage greater than 7%. Shinyulu and Hand Locked In are the stars in this category, each getting about 1 in 5 Florida misses when on the floor. Since Florida almost always has one of those bigs out there, it means that just from the center position, Florida has an offensive rebounding percentage of about 20%. When filtering for players who average at least 10 minutes a game this season, both Shinyulu and Hand Locked In rank in the top 10 in individual offensive rebounding percentage in the country. What this does is create second chance opportunities. Florida currently averages 16.3 second chance points per game, the third most in the country. 18.8% of their points come off of second chance opportunities, the 7th best rate in the country. So despite being a team that doesn't have the best effective field goal percentage, the trade-off is that they employ lineups that can dominate the glass and get them easier points that way. It all goes back to being able to dominate the paint offensively. As we get to the defensive side of the ball, we're going to start with the defensive rebounding. When lumping with the offensive rebounding, Florida is simply one of the elite teams on the glass. They rank second in offensive rebounding percentage as a team, but they also rank 5th in the country in defensive rebounding percentage. Similar to the offensive side of the ball, it's done by a committee, but there are a few stars. If we filter again for a minimum of 10 minutes a game, Shinyulu has the single highest defensive rebounding percentage in the country at 31.7%. To put this in other terms, basically, out of every 10 misses an opponent has, Shinyulu himself grabs 3 of those rebounds while on the floor. He's currently averaging 7.6 defensive rebounds a game, but Condon isn't too far behind at 5.8 himself. As would be expected, Florida does not allow many second chance points defensively. They have allowed the second fewest all season long, and it's a big reason why the Gators have a top 5 defense in the country. When taking into account the offensive and defensive side of the ball again, Florida has scored 221 more second chance points than they've given up this season. The gap between them and number 2 is the same as the gap between number 2 and number 8 in the country. Another way to put it is Florida has twice as large of positive differential as the 15th best team in the country. It isn't just that Florida is elite on the boards, it's that they're simply the best rebounding team in the country, something that travels to any game in March. Continuing on the defensive side of the ball, Florida is a team that does a great job of protecting the paint and the rim. Looking at their defensive shot chart, Florida is pretty much elite everywhere defensively. They're top 25 in defending the rim, paint, and corner threes, and they do a good job of forcing a lot of non-rim twos. The primary way that they do this is by playing more of a drop coverage system defensively, predicated on keeping the ball handler in front. Drop coverage is when the big defending the screener positions himself somewhere below the level of the screen and continues to move back as the play develops. It's designed to be able to limit shots at the rim and force more mid-range twos. Florida doesn't necessarily have one super elite shot blocker, but all of their bigs are capable enough in their own right. Let's get into some film right now to show it. This is going to be a kind of simple introductory to the drop coverage, where as this screen happens, Shinyulu is going to be below the screen, keep the ball handler in front, and ultimately force up a floater. Here's another example where coming off the screen, you're going to see Florida stay below the screen, trail, and force another long floater. This play is going to be another example of coverage Florida uses where they are going to ice this ball screen, meaning that they're forcing them towards their weak hand. Now, as this happens, UConn can't really do anything. They reset. And as they start getting downhill, this is where you just have a rim protector position to be able to block a shot. This is going to be another example of the similar thing, where after Georgia runs through their initial action, notice that Lee is going to angle his body so that way the ball handler can't use the screen, and he's now being forced into where the drop coverage help is and has to take a tough step back too. We're going to go back to the first play that I showed for defense because I want to highlight the tagging and help. Notice how here you're going to see Condon be able to tag the roll from the 4-man, but there really isn't much help anywhere else, and this gets us into our next point. The next area is how Florida does a good job of not allowing threes by simply not letting teams attempt them. On the season, teams are taking about 34.5% of their shots from 3 against Florida, the 34th lowest rate in the country. If we remember that these teams shoot very poorly on corner threes against Florida, it's because of how the help, or lack of, is designed within the defense. There are multiple ways to defend or apply help or not, and Florida chooses to often send little to no help from their guards. On that last play I broke down, Florida only sent help with their 4-man and not from their guards. This is a pretty common occurrence within the Florida defense, as they don't want to give up catch and shoot threes. Florida is in the top 5 in the country in allowing the fewest percent of shots to be catch and shoot threes, while they're top 5 in the country in forcing teams to take pull-up 2s and 3s. The trade-off for not sending help is that teams don't get many open looks from threes against Florida. Since Florida often plays 3 bigs together, they have more than enough size down low to be able to protect the rim without any help. This is going to be an example of that. So notice that as Texas A&M gets the ball, and eventually there's going to be a high pick and roll, they're going to refuse this screen, but there just isn't much help off the strong side corner from Houck. He has a simple stun at the ball, but he stays with his man knowing that there's going to be protection on the back side. Instead of drop coverage in this one, Florida is actually going to be switching everything, and what this does is it means that Florida doesn't really have to provide any sort of help because the ball is always going to stay in front, and defense just have to win their one-on-one matchup like they do here to force a tough floater. This may be the best example of not helping. As the ball gets moved around a bit, notice that on this drive, Lee is just tasked with staying in front and there is not a single ounce of help being sent his way. He has to win his one-on-one matchup, which he does. The last area to talk about, in my opinion, is the X factor for this Florida team, their guards. Now, I've just spent 15 minutes breaking down why Florida playing big has put themselves in the spot to be able to try to go back to back. There's no doubt in my mind that the front court can carry them, but March is a game of variance and you have to be able to adapt. What happens if a team is able to minimize Florida's rebounding advantage, or they start knocking down 3-point attempts? This is where the guard duo of Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee come into play. It's not that they've been playing poorly by any means, there's just another level I think to be tapped into. They're both averaging about 11.5 points per game and 3.5 assists, but neither has done it ultra efficiently. They are a combined 58 for 246 from 3 on the year, good for 23.6% from 3. Both were highly sought after transfers, and although they've both had their moments this season, getting them into another level puts Florida from being one of the Final Four contenders to being one of the top national title contenders in the country. The facilitating defense and drives have been solid for the most part from both, but the jumpers do need to get going at some point. Urban Klavzar comes off the bench and does provide Florida with a legitimate shooting option, but he doesn't have nearly the facilitating or downhill burst that Lee or Fland have. This isn't meant to be just purely a call out of Fland or Lee, but more another point in the case of why Florida can go back to back given that their guards can be so talented as well. The front court is what gives Florida an incredibly high baseline as a team, but the guards are what can put them over the top. Regardless though, Florida's ability to dominate you in the paint and on the glass for 40 straight minutes isn't going to be something that any team wants to face in March. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and here's a video breaking down Illinois' offensive dominance this season.